Composition is one of those things that can't be bought. You can't just go to the camera store and buy a bag of composition. Unfortunately, what you have to do is you have to learn techniques, tips and tricks, and there are many of them around. So in this video, we're going to cover off 7 quick tips for landscape photography composition. Now, before I do jump into the tips, I want to encourage you to head across to my website and download a copy of the landscape photography composition checklist that I've created. If you've ever been out on a landscape photography shoot and been overwhelmed when it comes to choosing your composition, you will love this checklist. It's got 7 very simple steps in it. It is free. You can go to on3legs.com/composition and download that right now. All right, let's kick straight into it. The first one is leading lines. There's no doubt that giving the viewer some direction by using leading lines will help pull their eyes to the main subject, or what we like to call the hero of your image. Leading lines have long been used by many of the greatest landscape photographers and can be found in many natural settings if you look with intent. It could be a road, could be a path, or even something more subtle such as ripples in the sand. Now here's a good tip for you. If you use a longer exposure, you can use light trails, water movement, or even clouds to create leading lines. Always keep an eye out for these elements, as this will also introduce some drama and emotion into your image. Next one is to keep your edges clear. There's nothing more frustrating than getting home to review your images on the computer only to realize that you accidentally included something that detracts from your image, or that you did not leave enough space around the main subject to give it room to breathe. So take your time, review each image before moving on to your next composition, and check the edges. So deliberately look at the edges of your image to see if there is anything out of place. Now here's a quick tip for you. You can always shoot wider than you need and then crop in a little in post-production. But let me tell you, it's impossible to add something back later in. Not impossible, but extremely difficult unless you're a Photoshop wizard, and who wants to be wasting time doing that anyway? Third one is then look out for distractions. Elements such as light poles, trees, rubbish, vehicles, anything like that in the wrong spot in your image can be really distracting. So having your subject also sitting below or across the horizon can also make your image distracting. So there's some few things that you can do. The first one is to understand parallax effect, which is something as simple as moving up, down, left or right a little will shift the perspective of a distracting element. In the case of this image you can see on screen right now, there's actually cars behind the tree. So by shifting my camera around a bit, I've been able to hide a majority of those out of the shot where they were all parked. Make sure you have eliminated any distractions that will take away from your overall image, and moving around is probably the easiest way to do that. Of course, you can do it by hand. You can just change your composition completely, but just keep an eye out for any distracting elements. All right, number 4, and that is to use foreground. If you're going to really take compelling images, you've got to take the 2D, that is a flat sensor, and turn it back into a 3-dimensional journey for the viewer. And one of my favorite ways to create depth and make the viewer feel like they are within my image is to use a strong foreground. As you take each shot, preview your image and check that you have a nice strong foreground element. Now, a good tip here for you, using a wide angle lens, you can get nice and close to your foreground. You can lower your tripod and point your lens slightly upward, will also open up the image and make your foreground work nicely with the rest of your image. Next one is to use the rules. You've probably heard about the rules of composition, and there are several rules that you can use to help you with creating a compelling image. Now, the rule of thirds is a popular one and will help you place your points of interest in the frame. Using the intersections of the rule of third lines, place your subject or strong elements on these intersections, and it will usually create a fairly compelling image. A quick tip for you, use this rule as a guide, and like all good rules, this one can also be broken. However, it is a great place to start if you're feeling stuck. Next one is to make sure you do have a strong subject. Very, very important. The difference between a good image and a great image is the strength of the subject. Often we can visit a grand lookout and we see a vista that just absolutely amazes us. It can be breathtaking, but taking a photo never seems to capture the same aspect as we see. And the reason for that is our eyes and our brains do something completely different to what the camera does. So without a strong subject within the frame, it is going to be difficult for the viewer of your image to know where to focus their attention in your image, and they're going to become lost. So a quick tip for you, look for ways you can tighten your composition using a different focal length, or maybe move closer to something of interest. Resist the temptation to try and fit everything in, and work on training your eye to see strong subjects within a grand scene. My final one's a bit of a rookie mistake. I've made it, many do, and that is not checking the horizon. If you forget to make sure your camera is level before taking a shot, it can often lead to losing the edges of your image when you try to straighten the image in post-processing. As you've twisted it slightly, you're going to lose parts of your image. Quick tip for you, most digital cameras have a virtual horizon built in these days. Learn where the feature is. It will save you a lot of time and a lot of frustration in the long run. All right, so there you have it. There's my 7 tips. Just a reminder, you can head across to my website, which is on3legs.com/composition, and download your free copy of the Landscape Photography Composition Checklist. Hope you enjoyed the vid. See you on the next one.